In this video, I want to show how to install, configure, set up, and secure Auditbeat so that it can be used with Elasticsearch and Kibana version 8. Auditbeat is a very useful tool for monitoring server activities like user activities, processes, and system file changes. In a few days, I will be releasing a part 2 to this video. Part 2 will focus on configuring email alerts and notifications on top of Auditbeat. But for this video, I just want to focus on getting things up and running. This video assumes you already have Elastic and Kibana installed. If you haven't done that yet, I will leave a link in the description to a video that shows you how to get Elasticsearch and Kibana up and running. The other thing you will need is a server that you want to monitor. I spun up a new installation of Ubuntu 20.04 for this purpose. So before we begin, I want to say that if you find the contents of this video helpful, then give this video a like. And if you want to stay on top of videos that we release, then you can subscribe to this channel. All right, let's get started. I have here a terminal window to my Ubuntu 20.04, which is a server somewhere in my office. Let's install Auditbeat. I'm going to use the apt-get approach, and you can find the instructions on the Elastic website. I'm basically going to copy this command, this command, this command, and this command, and just paste it to a bash script and then run it. So let's do that now. All right, so just paste that there. And let's go ahead and run it. So I'll pause until the execution completes. All right, everything installed properly. Now let's configure and set up Auditbeat. So I'm going to go to the etc directory, then go into the Auditbeat directory. And in here, you'll see some of the configuration files that came with the installation of Auditbeat. So I'm going to open up the auditbeat.yaml file. There's not too much in this file, so I will quickly go through some of the options and explain some of my edits. The first thing you're going to see is the modules section, and I'm not going to make really any edits to this section, except maybe for one change. But I'm going to mostly leave it the same because it's pretty powerful on its own, especially for some basic usage. I'll quickly go through each of the modules that have been enabled by default. The first module is the auditd module. Auditd works closely with the Linux kernel to monitor certain activities on your server and write them to logs. In fact, you can find on the Elastic website a lot of explanation around this module and any configuration that might be meaningful to you. So I'll let you explore that on your own afterwards, but leaving it the way it is for now will be pretty good for basic usage. The next module is the file integrity module. And what this module will do is that if there are any changes to any of these directories here, then it will be reported to Kibana and Elastic. So you can certainly add more directories to this array here. There's also documentation for the file integrity module here on the Elastic website. So you can use any of these extra options if they are relevant to you. The next module, which is actually declared twice, the system module. So the first declaration here is saying that if there are any changes to packages on your server, so if you've installed new things through apt-get or removed certain packages from apt-get or updated them, then those changes will be reported to Kibana and Elastic at an interval of 2 minutes. The second declaration of the system module monitors these 5 data sets. So if there are any changes to hosts, login, process, sockets, or users, then those changes will be reported back to Kibana and Elastic at a period of 12 hours. And this one we will change. I think 12 hours is not frequent enough. For our purposes, I'll change it to 2 minutes. Okay. And that's pretty much all there is to the modules section. Oh, and you're seeing some additional options here for the system module. So on the Elastic website, there is documentation for the system module, and there'll be explanation for the additional options that you can use for this system module. Okay, carrying on. I think most of these can just be left alone. Oh, dashboards, we do want to enable this. So by enabling the dashboards option, what will happen is that when we run the setup command in a few minutes, the setup command will load into Kibana some dashboard templates or graphical user interfaces that makes it easier for us to review the activities or the audit activities on our server. So if you were to actually go to Kibana right now and you click on the dashboard link here, you're going to see this page here saying that there are no dashboards. But after we run the setup command, and because this has been enabled, we will see some dashboards appear here in the Kibana website later. Okay, so we'll set this to true. Next, we just have to tell Auditbeat where our Kibana server is. And this is basically just this URL up here. We can ignore this section, ignore this. Oh, now we're on the Elasticsearch. Okay, now we have to specify our Elasticsearch destination. And we are using SSL for this one. Because we will need to run the setup command, I am going to use the super user login credentials right here. We only need to run the setup once, so I think it's okay to have a super user do this. But later, I want to replace these credentials with those of a less privileged user. That way, when we let Auditbeat run normally, it will be using a less privileged account to publish routine data to Elastic. If bad actors gain access to the server, at least they won't have access to the Elastic super user account. You can ignore the rest of these options here in Auditbeat. So let's get ready to run our setup. So I'm going to go to the USR share directory. Then there's an Auditbeat directory that came with the installation of Auditbeat. And in here, there's a binary directory. And this binary directory gives us some executables that we can run. And if we type Auditbeat help, we're going to see some of the options available for this command. And first thing I'm going to do is test our configuration files. So I have a command ready. So if I type .auditbeat, here, let me just clear the screen. If I type Auditbeat and let's say test our configuration file that we just finished editing, and this is our configuration file. Now I also have to specify where the home directory is for our application, for the Auditbeat application. I noticed that some of my other colleagues don't have to type this, but for some reason, every time I install Auditbeat, I need to. So maybe just some of our path and environment variables are different between my machines and my colleagues. But and the data directory, we're going to need this. Let me just type this in. Auditbeat. Okay. So eventually we're going to create a key store to store some of our API secrets. So by specifying the path data, we're going to be creating our key store file there. All right. So I'm just going to test the configuration first. All right. So that's good. It says okay. We're going to test our connection. All right, everything looks good. This 0.33 IP address is actually the elastic.evermite.net domain. So this is the address of that URL. Now you might be using a self-signed certificate, so you might see some warnings instead of OKs, but that's fine. All right. So I think now we're ready to run the actual setup. And the setup will actually load some dashboards into Kibana as well. So let's do this. And this might take a minute or so. So I'm going to pause until everything is done. All right, looks like the dashboards have been set up and Auditbeat has been set up within Kibana. So if we click over here, if I click refresh on this dashboard link, you can see that Auditbeat has now provided some of these dashboards. So if I were to, let's say, open this up, you can start to see a little bit of what it looks like. All right, there's no data because we haven't started up Auditbeat, but at least we've done the initial setup. In fact, if I go to stack management, I believe I should see under index management, here you can see that an index for Auditbeat has been set up. So I think we should be ready to move on to the next step. We're almost ready to publish Auditbeat data to Kibana and Elastic. But before we do that, I need to change the Auditbeat user. So if I go to the cd etc Auditbeat directory and open up the auditbeat.yaml file, when doing the initial setup, we use the super user elastic abcd1234. And that's fine for setup because setup is just a one-time activity. But for publishing Auditbeat data to Kibana and Elastic on an ongoing basis, we should use a user that is less privileged. And let's go ahead and actually set up a less privileged user then. Now to set up the less privileged user, we need to create a role with fewer privileges and then assign that role to a user. And there are instructions on how to set up that role in the documentation for Auditbeat, which you can find on the Elastic website. And there's a section for creating a publishing user. So if we scroll down, these are the privileges, the minimum privileges needed for a user to be able to publish Auditbeat data to Kibana and Elastic. So let's go ahead and create this role and then assign this role to a new user. All right, so I'm going to go back to my Elastic Stack. I'm going to click on, go to Stack Management, which actually we're already here at Stack Management. Yeah, so let's go to Stack Management and then we'll go to Roles under Security. And I will create a new role called Auditbeat, let's say Publisher. And the roles we need are Monitor, Read ILM. So Monitor, ILM, Read ILM. Oops. So this one. And then the other thing we need is create doc permission on the Auditbeat index. Oh, here's the index. Okay, let's create this role. And now let's create a user. And I'll give the user the same name as the role, just so we can stay consistent and makes it easier to remember all this. And I'll just, it doesn't matter what email address I use because I don't intend on really logging in as this user or setting myself reset passwords for this one. For the password, we should choose something secure. I'm just going to use something simple for now, ABCD1234. And then we assign the role we just created. And we go ahead and press Create User. All right, so we've created the user, we have assigned the role to it. And now if we wanted to, I could just change this to Auditbeat Publisher, which is the username, and restart the Auditbeat module, and everything should work. But I don't like using username passwords. I prefer to use an API key for better security. So let's actually do that instead. Let's create an API key for this user. So what we're going to do is we go back to our Kibana Elastic Stack, click on the menu, click on Dev Tools, and I'm going to paste in some code that I've already prepared. There we go. So what this is doing is we're going to do a post request to the API endpoint _security API key grant. And this is the username that we're going to try to generate an API key for. This is the password to log in as this user. And once the API key is created, we're going to give it a human readable name called Auditbeat user in case we need to reference it again later to modify it. Well, when I say modify, all you can really do is delete it. So let's go ahead and create an API key for Auditbeat user. Oh, so we can't do that right now. Let's see what the issue is. Oh, I think it might be because I typed in the wrong username. And I'll just call the API key the same thing as the username just to make it easier for myself to remember. Let's see if this fixes it. Oh, there we go. And this here we see the API key, and this is the base 64 version of the API key. So I'm going to copy this and save it because we're going to need it. I'll paste it in here so I don't lose it. So at this point, I could choose to paste the ID :API key into here and comment out these two lines or delete these two lines. So I could do that and then restart Auditbeat and everything should work. But I'm not going to do that because I don't like leaving secrets in a file like this. I would prefer to use a keystore so that all secrets are encrypted. So to go about doing that, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to delete these two lines. I'm going to replace ID :API key with an environment variable that I'm about to populate. Or I'm going to populate this environment variable through the Auditbeat keystore. And the value I'm going to actually put in the keystore is this. All right, so I've prepared this. Now let's go use the keystore. Auditbeat binary, and we are going to run the command auditbeat keystore add ES API key. That's the variable name that we set in our YAML file. And we will have to state our configuration file, path.home, path.data, so that our keystore file is going to be placed in this data directory. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Oh, right, I didn't create the keystore file yet, so Auditbeat is smart enough to ask me if I want to create it. I'll say yes. And then I will go ahead, copy this, paste it in here. All right, and if we actually look in var lib Auditbeat, you can see that there's the Auditbeat keystore here. So I think I should be able to just say systemctl enable Auditbeat, systemctl start Auditbeat. All right, so let's see if any errors happen while I'm starting it up. Let's see, failed to, oh, that was earlier on. there's an error here. What's the error? Oh, I've seen this issue before, bulk create. All right, so for whatever reason, I feel like maybe the documentation here, let's see. The documentation here might be missing something. So if anyone knows what privileges I'm also missing, let me know. But for now, I found that what can solve the problem is if I'm going to go to user, Auditbeat publisher. If I add another role called editor, this would work. Well, actually, to make it work, every time you update the user, this API key that we created does not acknowledge any permission changes we've created the user. So we actually need to delete this API key. And we actually need to create a new API key, which will then respect the new changes and new permission settings for that user. So now I'm going to go over here. Let's go to DevTools and let's generate the API key again, right? Which is this. So I'm going to copy this because we're going to need it. Come back here. We don't need any of this anymore. We're going to generate this. I'm going to copy that and let's rerun the keystore. This one. Copy this. Yes, we're going to overwrite our last ES API key value. Paste this one in here. Okay, systemctl restart Auditbeat. All right, so no errors this time. Okay, so I think that should be it. So now we should be able to check our platform. I'll click to the menu. Let's take a look at dashboards. And let's just take a look at the host dashboard or even the overview. Let's see, overview. This one, system overview. And there we go. We're starting to see some metrics from my Evermite 1 server. The overall system overview. Yep, everything is here. So what I think I'll do is I'm going to set up a second server just to make sure Kibana and Elastic collect data for both of them. Okay, I've SSH'd into my second Evermite server, and I'm going to run the same installation procedure. I'll just copy from my install script here. And I'll go ahead and run this. All right, I'll pause for a moment and resume in a moment. All right, everything's installed. Let's go to the etc auditbeat directory. Let's edit our YAML file. I'll leave all these the same, except I'll change this one to 2 minutes so that I can see if there's failed logins or interruptions to hosts on a more frequent basis. And I don't need to set the dashboards anymore, so I'll leave this false. I will need to point to Elastic. And we're going to use the keystore for our API key. And I'm supposed to configure Kibana. Where? Oh, here it is. with an HTTPS. All right, so I think that should be it. Now let's go to the Auditbeat directory. Go into, and now let's run the keystore. All right, so let's see if this is all correct. Configuration file path.home. All right, that looks okay to me. And we're going to be asked to provide the API key. Yes. Paste. Systemctl enable Auditbeat. Systemctl start Auditbeat. Let's journal CTL to see if any issues. Okay, no errors, so that looks good so far. And I think in a moment, we should see a second host appear here. So I'll pause for a moment until that host appears. All right, so we've got both host information in here. And if I click to this dashboard, all right, so we're properly configured with both servers submitting Auditbeat data to Kibana and Elastic. All right, so that's the basics of getting Auditbeat up and running. And in a few days, I will be releasing a part 2 that will focus on configuring email alerts on top of Auditbeat. Now, if you found this video helpful, then please give it a like. And if you want to stay on top of new videos that we release, then you can subscribe to this channel.